Then if, sweet child, I go away, while yet your hearts are few, I hope some lessons I have taught may not be lost on you. And if it is not mine to guide your feet from day to day, may loving hearts be ever near to watch you, lest you stray.
Welcome to One World Community Productions. My name is Linda Weltner. I'd like to welcome S.L. Hemingway, who is the unlikely author of a book called Sarah of Salem, which is about an 11-year-old girl in 1858 who really lived. This is part of a series that is historical and that will explain what life was like in 1858. S.L. has been a news director and producer, and he put on one of the first black sitcoms called Brother Love that was produced. In what years was that? How early?
It was 1969 through 1973.
Before many of you were born.
Yeah.
Is the answer, right? And for some reason, this man who has dealt for a long time with black history and black issues decided, out of, we'll find out where, that he would write a book about an 11-year-old white girl who grew up in Salem. And why don't you tell us how you got interested in her?
Well, Sarah was a member, or at the time, of the Baha'i faith. And I am a Baha'i. And I just very casually knew that she was from Salem. But I didn't know that that she was so influential in black history, and that her father was a conductor of the Underground Railroad. I was really surprised at that. So I wanted to figure out what happened. How did she become who she was later on in life? And so it's, by the way, it's 1859. She was around 11 years old, going on 12 years old, where I think she came of age. And she came of age through a series of events that are kind of described in this fictional, it's not a mystery, but it's a fantasy that I've created.
And who really lived and who really did these
things. Yeah, that's right.
And you filled in her humanity, right?
Yeah, I filled in her humanity and where she grew, what ideas she had. That's why I entitled it Almost Perfect Daughter, because as described by the poem that I had read earlier, it was written by her mother, by the way, that she was concerned that her little girl would not go astray, because she was not rambunctious, but she was a real girl. She was out there, I suppose. They nicknamed her Birdie because she was always doing things like flying the coop, and she wasn't always in the yard when she should have been.
Right. And standards were very strict on the behavior for a girl, and she wasn't following them.
No. In fact,
so her parents did not tell her, however, did they, that they were secretly conducting an Underground Railroad?
No. She should have realized it, because there were these strange people,
Black people.
Black people coming into her house once in a while. And but she was told that they actually worked for the father, stringing telephone wires. He was a telegraph operator and an engineer, and that was his business. And so she thought that that's why they were there.
Why did you pick 11 and 1859. What's so significant about that year?
Okay. Well, first of all, she lived at a time period was almost a pivotal time where we believe like a new world order was occurring. A whole
coming
new,
into being.
A whole new way was happening, coming into being. In fact, 1859 was when the Darwin theories were published. Of course, he was developing it, but they were
The whole idea of evolution.
That's right. As well as the other component that people don't know about it is the Boolean ideas of computer one and two, and the adding, which made it algebraic.
So the earliest thoughts about how a computer would work were coming into being
Many other sciences were happening, and it seems to happen at the same time. They all kind of came together before the 1860. It became, it's like I call it the decade, the whole decade of revelation. But that particular year was a pinpoint year of revelation.
And it was heading toward the Civil War.
That's right.
All those pressures were building
That's
up.
right.
And right before the Emancipation Proclamation.
Yeah, it would happen during the Civil War. But people they just couldn't they had enough of it. The abolitionists they were saying that we can't last just waiting around for this freedom to happen. Black people had lost their rights as human beings, really, because of the Dred Scott decision.
Tell the audience what was decided.
Oh, well, the Dred Scott decision was that actually a black man was not a whole man. He was not even a third of a man, basically, actually 2/3 of a man. And he had anywhere in the United States, if he couldn't prove that he was a citizen, which was impossible, that he actually could be re-enslaved if he was freed. He was like, I was sitting in a shop somewhere, just eating my lunch.
In Salem.
In Salem, someone could come and pick me up and say, unless you can say that you have lived here a certain amount of time and that I have the right ID, identifications, I could be picked up and brought back to my so-called slave master in the South.
And we think of slavery as occurring mostly in the South, but these people were potential slaves, right?
That's right.
Any moment, and they knew that.
Right.
And didn't a slave ship come to Salem? And what was that story?
It was the Newport. The Newport was sitting out in a harbor in Salem Harbor in 1859. Allegedly, it came to for repairs, but it was there. It was waiting for who knows what to happen, and what happened was described in the book, and the plans of filling the ship with new product.
Human cargo.
That's right. You know, the slave trade had been outlawed.
So, what did Sarah and her family? How were they coping during this period?
Well, the father, Moses' farmer, he was a man who invented the fire alarm.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And many other type of inventions. Automatic shades. He invented an early car, actually the first automobile.
Yeah.
That went around the streets of Dover,
Too
New
bad
Hampshire.
we don't have a plaque to him here in Salem. You'd think, is there any memorial to the?
No. The
He's
only
just
thing
been
is
forgotten.
where he lived. It was on Pearl Street, and where she grew up. She wasn't born in Salem, but she grew up in Salem, and she graduated from Salem High School.
Oh, okay.
And she graduated summa cum laude, and she was the class valedictorian in 1868.
And what did they do as far as the slave ship and the whole thing about slaves?
Well, that was it. I mean, that's the whole idea of the book. The whole idea of the book is that there was a piece of cloth that identified slaves, someone who has run away. And for some reason, Sarah, she didn't know what the cloth was about, and she took it from her mother. And her mother, who was also part of this Underground Railroad, said it was for another reason. It was a gown.
Yeah.
It's for a gown. It was a form.
And the slaves had to wear it?
Well, they didn't have to wear it, but it was Moses had created a luminous material or thread or something that was in the scarf itself that would identify a newly runaway.
Oh, so they could rescue him.
Yeah.
To his friends.
To the individuals who were there.
Yeah.
It was kind of involved, and so therefore she lost the piece of cloth.
Oh.
See, but in the meantime, certain individuals in the South were looking for a particular slave, and this slave was the illegitimate son of a very wealthy slave owner who owned a lot of Carolina.
Isn't that funny to think that they owned their sons?
I know.
They didn't
Right.
bring into their family in any way. They just treated them because they were tainted, right, by black blood.
That's right. Yeah, but you see, as an inheritor, he didn't have any offspring, and so according to English law, he could have inherited the entire Carolinas because of
he was the only son.
He was the only son, but he was a runaway. See.
And did the father want him to get that property?
Yeah, he did, but he didn't. There was no deed or will, but they wanted to just get rid of this one guy, and this is what they were trying to do, trying to find who he was.
So they could keep him from being a major owner of...
That's right.
Wow.
And so that's what happened when that piece of cloth, the only way that was able to identify the runaways, so that any child who had that piece of cloth, they were trying to kill them,
because they had been part of the runaway.
That's right, and so that's what it is. There was a tremendous fire happened. Just a couple of months before that, in 1859, at the Howard Church, which was a slave church, that the Sarah farmer family, that was their church that they worshipped in.
Oh, so it was integrated? It had white families as well as black?
Probably one of the only churches in Salem that did that. Now, we're talking about, they called it the slave church.
Now, we have a book in Marblehead about the Underground Railroad, and there's a house where you can go in. I think people live in it now, but that is part of this whole tradition. Does Salem know that it has a large history in the...
Well, yeah, it does, but you see, that's kind of, it's kind of illusionary. When you talk about the Underground Railroad, you have a friend, right, who has come from Chicago, let's say, and he stays over your house, right? Comes at night. It's a friend of yours. You don't put him in any special place in your house, no walls or anything like that. But he's a friend.
Yeah.
And so he's a guest. And so the next night he stays at your house that night, and then the next night, it's a long distance. Maybe he can travel 10 miles, and he's actually going to the Cape. And so he goes, he knows somebody in Salem, and he stays at someone's house in his front living room, you know, in Salem. I mean, in Boston. He stays
Oh,
in
in
Boston, from
Boston.
Salem to
And
Boston.
can he travel by water? Did many of them?
Yes, some of them would travel, but it's another kind of idea to say that most of the Underground Railroad was in false walls and basements and things like that. No, the individuals actually who had those kind of things, those walls, the false walls or basements or hiding, were actually hiding the runaways or the guests from the members of their own family, because they didn't want them to see that they were involved in some sort of black trade.
So what
but
you're
it was just, I'm saying there were a lot of people who were involved in the so-called transportation of blacks from slavery to, let's say, Canada.
So you're saying that there were enough blacks in Salem at the time that a black person could be visiting,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't have to be in utmost secrecy.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Because you wouldn't know. But also, if now the thing about the farmer house was which he had rented. You know, it was right beside the railroad tracks.
Oh.
11 Pearl Street. And that's where the house was and where the people visited as guests, right? And they would leave and hop on the train going northward toward Newburyport, right? And then from there they would have another connection. Perhaps they would go by ship to Nova Scotia or boat by Nova Scotia, or they would take another trip up toward Maine area, the Portland area. But that's how it worked.
So Sarah of Salem illuminates the role that Salem played in the Underground Railroad and the slave emancipation or rescue.
Yeah, right.
But you have another theme in here, which is that you were trying to convince me and your readers that Sarah's father installed electricity 20 years before it was officially invented by Thomas Edison. So
Yes.
how could that be?
Well, first of all, Thomas Edison didn't invent electricity, of course, and didn't invent the light bulb. What he did was that he made a more efficient light bulb, and he patented that invention.
Who knew?
Well, I think a lot of people know that what you read and learn about different people is not really true, especially if they say it themselves.
You can't trust the regular telling of American history.
And really, because here is this guy was a great promoter. I think he was the greatest promoter. Although most of the stuff that he did had been foreshadowed by Tulsa before and after. You know,
yeah, Tesla.
Tesla, rather.
The father electrified their house. Was it the first house in America?
First house in the world.
Was in Salem.
It was in Salem, on 11 Pearl Street in Salem.
And how did Salem, would they give him a big award?
No, of course they wouldn't, because he made this great mistake by inviting the board of directors of the Salem Gas Company.
That's like having your wind power and inviting an ExxonMobil to come and see you, right?
Exactly. And they were, that's right, the big thing was installing.
We fight. Change,
That's
don't
what
we?
it is. We really do. And the idea, the concept of electricity lighting the world would have changed so many different things so much earlier than 20 years. That took them 20 years to really get that concept that you can read at night. You can do all kinds of things. You can be coming home from work. Well, they had gas lights. It didn't help, but even then, it was compromised. The kind of lighting they did give to street lights.
Yeah, flickering.
Yeah, it was a flickering type thing. But
Yeah.
they were in the houses. They were in homes. They had, but not all homes. Only
But
the real wealthy.
you know what that is? Look how long we've been trying to get wind power. I
Yeah.
mean, they fought the thing at the Cape for almost as long, and
Yeah.
there's just this resistance,
I have no idea why that is. I did.
human nature,
Well, yeah.
and the
Murmuring.
profit motive.
Yeah.
In both cases.
Right, and this is what happened to Moses Farmer. The prophet, most of his inventions, although he patented a lot of his inventions, you need money, you need lawyers, you need people to do it right for you.
Right,
So
right.
he lost a lot of.
Was he deeply discouraged? Do you know?
I think he was. I think the end of his life, he was invited to go to the Columbian Exposition in 1892, and that was the City of Lights. It was electricity, and that Edison had so-called co-opted from a lot of
So
individuals.
some people still knew that he had done this amazing
some
thing.
people during that
Yeah.
time period, but not everyone.
Right. But
And-
now I want to just ask one thing. This book ends, she's 11, 12, right?
Right.
She went on to have a greater effect on Black history, didn't she, with her camp in Maine?
Oh yeah, Greenacre.
Yeah.
Greenacre was a place where various individuals, like Harriet Tubman, even as early as W.E. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington. There's a lot of individuals who major players in the struggle for civil rights and human rights in this country, African American, went to summer courses at Greenacre.
And she had become a
And
Baha'i also.
At that particular time, she had become a Baha'i, but she was able to bring together the various individuals in her discussions concerning what race means in America. That there's no question about it. That it is a problem, and a lot of the concepts of the unity of mankind that she was able, humankind, that she was able to bring forth to those discussions and those courses that changed in many ways the way that the African American looked at solving the problems of race in America. And through them, and through the individuals, because they were the same people at Niagara, the Niagara Conference, that created the NAACP. And so they developed this type of conversation.
So as hard as it seems to believe, given that we've never heard of it before today, this woman and her dad and mom had a very great impact on the Black movement.
Right.
And that's kind of amazing that we don't know more about her.
Yeah.
So this book is written for adults and teens, would you say?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah,
you could read it
yeah.
at 10 or 11
Yeah, well,
And
it could
it's-
be read to, or questions.
or read to, and it's also part of a series.
Yeah.
Because you're going on at the end to, here are the names of his other books: Sarah Saves the World, Sarah at Harper's Ferry, and Sarah Goes to War, Her Letters to Soldiers. I think this should be in all of Salem schools, for sure. But if your kid isn't learning it in school,
Right.
it's really very inspiring.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
It's just a wonderful book and part of the hidden history
Right.
of the United States, of which there is so much,
Oh, 100%.
so much.
also, I want to thank you, for all the things that you yourself, in interviewing various individuals that I've seen over the years,
Oh, thanks.
because you have an insight. The viewer really doesn't really experiment with. They don't look into probing questions. They just accept things that they see on TV.
Well, if you don't want to accept what you see on TV or what
Yeah.
the history teacher
Right.
taught you, these books can be gotten on Amazon.
Amazon.
And you can also get them in an ebook if you like reading on a Kindle.
Right.
Or you can pick them up in Salem at the bookstore.
Oh, yeah,
I don't
right.
know his name either. But
Yeah.
anyway, it reads very interestingly, and if your kid is older and still likes to be read to, as my grandsons
Oh, yeah.
still do, the next thing you need is a CD so kids can,
Oh, yes,
you can
right.
put it in and listen while you're driving.
Right. Thank you.
Thank
I
you
just-
so much. It has been so
Thank you.
wonderful
Thank you.
to discover a whole new world that I don't think any of us knew anything about.
Well, thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you. Self-publish. It's a good job. You can get some other people who are self-published.
Yeah, I know someone else who's self-publishing. Yeah, but it's really hard. So we wrote this book, Childhood Diabetes, Raising a Healthy Child, right?